Okay, so what we are talking about in this video are the 5 mechanisms of evolution, and I hope you have watched the Bozeman Paul Anderson video on the 5 mechanisms of evolution, and if you haven't, by goodness, go watch it. It will help you. I'm going to give you a brief overview, but he does a much better, deeper job of explaining it. And so if you did not watch that video, go watch it now. It should be linked somewhere for you, Google Schoology somewhere, or just Google it yourself, and you should be able to watch it. I'm sure it's on YouTube as well. But first I can list the 5 mechanisms of evolution. Okay, and we're going to do this using the 5 fingers, and I'll tell you why. And no, this is not a Thanksgiving turkey craft that we're doing. Okay, so genetic drift is going to occur in small populations, or it's going to be more easily seen, I should say, in small populations. And so we use our pinky for genetic drift because it's small. Sexual selection, we're going to use the ring finger. Mutations, the middle finger, because it starts with an M. The pointer finger for gene flow, because you're moving, you're going over there, so over there. And then the thumb for natural selection, because natural selection either says, yay, you get to survive and reproduce, or no, you don't get to survive and therefore you don't reproduce. Okay, so that's an easy way to remember all 5, but it's not just enough to list them, although that is the first statement. I can list the 5 mechanisms of evolution. You also have to be able to define them and describe how each of these can lead to a change in allele frequencies, because remember, biological evolution is simply a change in allele frequencies, meaning 50 years ago, there were 75% tall and 25% short, or 75% big T's and 25% little t's, and now there are 75% little t's and 25% big T's. Okay, so the numbers have shifted, and that's what we mean by allele frequencies. We literally count up how many of these we have, and then times 2, because they have 2 big T's, and add that to this, okay? And so we say, okay, you know, if there's 10 people, let's say we have 10 and 5. Okay, so that would be 20 big T's plus another 10, so that would be 30 big T's, and this would be 5 T's times 2 plus 5, so that would be 15 T's. Okay, so that would be about 67% big T and 33-ish% little t. Okay, whoops, that should be a little t. Okay, that's the basics. We're going to go into more details next week. But anyway, how can we change those numbers? What kinds of things can happen to change this? Maybe we have more little t's in the future, and so now it's 67 over here and 33 here, or it's 50-50, or it's 90-10, or whatever. These are the 5 things that can change those numbers. Okay, so let's talk about them in the order, I guess, that I have them on the I can statements. The first one is I can define gene flow. Gene flow is kind of what it sounds like. It's your genes flowing from one spot to another. Well, how do your genes move? They're inside your body, so the only way your genes can move is if you move. So if you were to move to Belize, you would take your genes there. Now, are you going to leave your genes there? Not unless you reproduce. So you are not going to add your genes to that population in a permanent manner unless you reproduce in that new population. So it's not enough just to move there. You've got to move there and reproduce there in order for your genes to become a part of that population's gene pool. Okay? So that's what gene flow is. It's the movement of alleles or genes when an organism moves from one population to another. How does it change allele frequencies? Well, if you had let's say you have population A, okay, on one side of a mountain and population B on another. And these are all, I think in the PowerPoint, these were all bluebirds and these were all redbirds. Okay, so 100% blue, 100% red. If one of the blues moves over here, this population is still 100% blue, but this population is no longer 100% red. If that bluebird starts mating with these birds and making more bluebirds, what we're going to see is this is no longer 100% red. It might be 90 red, 10 blue. And then if the blues do really well, you might come back in 100 years and it's 50-50, 50 red, 50 blue. And so over time, you're seeing, because these blue genes or blue alleles have been added to this population and left there because the organism reproduced in this new population, that is gene flow. And that is how it can change those allele frequencies. If this had been, say, 50% blue, 50% white, and some of the blues left, now it might be 60% white and 40% blue because some of your blues left. So this original population can also change due to the leaving of those species, or those, not species, those organisms. Okay, so that's what gene flow is, and that's how it can change allele frequencies. The next one is natural selection. Natural selection is basically survival of the fittest. Okay, so if you have a trait that makes you more likely to survive, then you're going to survive and reproduce and pass those traits down. If you have a trait that makes it less likely for you to survive, then you're going to die and not reproduce, and your genes or traits are not going to get passed down. Okay, so that's what natural selection is, nature choosing who gets to survive and reproduce. And then as far as how it changes allele frequencies, let's say, going back to our green and white analogy, okay? So I have my green and I have my white, and let's scatter a few back here. Well, that's a few is more than, there we go. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Okay, and so over time, these guys get eaten. So now I am 60% green, 40% white. And then I come back in a little bit, and these have been eaten. So now I am 33% green and 67% white. Okay, you see what I'm saying? It's changing the frequencies of the alleles. That is evolution. And so that's how natural selection can change that, because the ones that survive are the genes you're going to see become more common, and the ones that don't survive, those are the genes and traits you're going to see become less common. All right, the next one is genetic drift. This is probably the most, I don't know, abstract one. It just seems people have a difficult time understanding this. Genetic drift is the random change in allele frequencies. The best example I can give for this is you have a meadow, and in that meadow you have flowers, okay? And let's say you have 25% pink and 25% white, and what other colors? Purple and yellow. Okay, so purple, 25% yellow. And there's a volcanic eruption. Lava goes everywhere, okay? And they're kind of scattered around, so you might have some pinks here and whites here and purples there and some yellows and another yellow and another yellow and some purples there and purples there and a pink and a white and a white and a purple and a yellow, okay? And then that lava comes, okay? It comes oozing down, and it wipes out one whole part of that scenario, okay? And so we went from having quite a few purples, right? Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 13. Of course, I didn't get to pick an even number. But 3 out of 13 were purple. I didn't do my 25%, but anyway. 3 out of 13 were purple. Now, 4 out of 13, sorry. Now 1 is. So that's a drastic change to go from 4 out of 13 to 1 out of 6. So 1/6 of them are now purple. My pinks are completely gone. All of my pinks got killed just because they happen to be growing in that area. So pinks went down to 0%. And then my yellows are 50% because more of them happen to survive 3 out of 6. My whites are, good grief, my brain can't do this kind of math. My purples are going to be, I want to say, about 15%. It might be more like 17. And my whites are now going to be 35%. Yeah, I was adding the 50. Okay, so that's a change from 25 to 0, 25 to 35, 25 to 15, 25 to 50. Okay, allele frequencies have changed just due to some random thing. This lava came in and killed some flowers. That's all that happened. Not any intentionality there. So that's how genetic drift can alter things. Make sure you know the bottleneck effect. This would be an example of that, where you had a big population and we lost a huge chunk of it. And so now we've lost an entire allele, in this case pink. So the bottleneck effect is where you have a huge population and it gets shrunk down to a small population, and all you're left with allele-wise are the alleles that are in that small population. All right, the next one is a mutation. Mutation is a change in the DNA, right? And that's supposed to be DNA. That's a pretty crappy DNA, but anyway. And that's going to give you new alleles. How does that change percentages? Well, let's say that I had 25% pink, 25% white, 25% purple, 25% yellow, and then that's, 50 years ago, and then this mutation occurs, and now I have orange. Well, if I even have one orange flower, let's say there are 100 flowers, so it was 25 of each. If I have one orange flower, these are no longer 25% because these 4 colors are making up 99 of the 100, not 100 of the 100. So these numbers are going to drop a little bit. Let's say another 50 years goes by and I go up to 20% orange. Okay? Then these numbers might all drop to 20 as well. So I would have 20% orange, 20% pink, 20% white, 20% purple, 20% yellow, because I have this new mutation that's stealing some of my numbers from these, if that makes sense. And so that's how it's going to change the allele frequencies. And the last one is sexual selection. Sexual selection is also known as non-random mating. And what this means is that one gender is choosing who they mate with. It's not random. Things like sponges, sea urchins, they throw it all out in the ocean. It's a gross thought. But their eggs and their sperm, or sometimes just the sperm and the egg is still inside the female, or still inside the female. Or the hermaphrodite if they're both. Anyway, that's random because it's whatever sperm makes it through the water and gets to the other sponge or the other sea urchin. Okay, that's random mating. Non-random mating or sexual selection is where there is a choice. And generally speaking, the female is doing the choosing because eggs are expensive. And so the female doesn't want to waste her egg on a loser. So she wants to find a good, strong, healthy male so that when she fertilizes that egg or when he fertilizes that egg, she knows that that baby is getting healthy, strong genes, which will increase its chance of survival. Okay, so that's sexual selection, and the way that it can increase it is, let's say that we have, 50% white bears, foxes, and 50% brown. But for whatever reason, the ladies like the white ones or the ladies like the brown ones, whichever. Let's say they like the brown ones. And so more often the brown get to mate and the white don't. Okay, the white males are just kind of left out. What we might see over time is that slowly that changes to 30% white and 70% brown. Simply because the females are choosing the browns more often. And so that's going to create a change in allele frequencies, evolution. Okay, so those are the 5 mechanisms of evolution. Remember your fingers. Use your fingers. On the AP exam, pull your hand up if you have to. Okay, it's a good way to remember them. But also, you need to know what they mean, so define them, and you also need to know how they can change the allele frequencies. In other words, how can they make evolution occur? I hope that helps. If you still have questions, let me know.